17 seconds. Magnus Carlsen starts with 15 minutes, the English opening. We've seen Magnus do this before today.
Yeah, we've seen it before, and it worked extremely well against Levon Aronian. And will Lightning strike twice? That's the question. 9 minutes against Magnus Carlsen. Most of us wouldn't be able to handle it. But here we go. Nakamura clearly has done his preparation. He would have been watching that match earlier today that Magnus had. And, OK, Magnus just feeing Ketuing. Black is the first to castle. Black can actually wreck the white pawn structure right now. I'm surprised by this choice. Robert, James, what do you think of this opening?
You know, I like it for Magnus, and Hikaru is starting to think here because any sort of imbalance is good for the side that needs to win the game. If you take on c3 with that bishop, the pawn structure is ruined, double isolated pawns. We keep talking about how we don't like those, but we love ourselves a good bishop pair. So here's the big moment. Will Hikaru take on c3, James?
Yeah, I don't think he will. And the reason being, the bishop pair is very nice. I also do not want to give him that imbalance with me having this big time difference, too, as well. Unless, you know, if I know the theory, which it looks like he doesn't here, he's now thinking now. So, of course, they may be a little bit out of theory here. I need to make something happen, but I do need to figure out what I want to do with this bishop. Because it's kind of a clumsy bishop, too, as well. It could be hit by many things. I'm also moving it a second or third time. I may need to make a move like play h6. But maybe he's going to tuck the bishop on f8 if it's attacked. Because we need to move it somewhere. He couldn't wreck the structure, but he needs to know exactly what he's doing afterwards, right? Are we going to get rid of the bishops here? Ooh-wee, what is this? Knight d5. This is getting spicy already.
Yeah, wow. Magnus saying, OK, we can trade all the knights off the board, but the structure change might favor white. Wow. OK, when you need to win, this is counterintuitive somewhat, allowing all these trades, but he's asking big questions. Nakamura has spent a bit of time so far. Big difference on the clock.
And that's what surprises me. He has already spent about a minute and a half. He goes into a think tank. And this trade, yes, it favors. Now, to remember, if this game ends in a draw, Hikaru actually wins the match, you would think it's simple, go for the knight trades, but it changes the structure, an asymmetrical pawn structure, and you've got to evaluate where that really leads. Or will Magnus recapture with the bishop?
If he trades all the knights, it just leads to an advantage for white, and this is looking like it's happening here. I don't like this for Hikaru. It's Magnus's style of position. We have a semi-open c-file for the white rooks to go after the black pawns. Black has not finished development either. I do not like this one bit for Hikaru, and he's way down on the clock. He's spending so much time already.
Yeah, I've seen Magnus actually have this exact pawn structure several times, including, you mentioned him earlier, Michael Adams. In the London Chess Classic a few years ago, Magnus had this exact structure, also with the bishops, also with that very far advanced central pawn, and he just destroyed Adams there, just completely outplayed him. Extra space for white. White's rooks have access to the open c-file, which is going to be essential later on. Magnus first, though, he's got to guard against some attacks against his central pawn. I'm expecting that dark-squared bishop to just come out, and I think advantage white on both board and clock.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough there. I mean, definitely, I'm one move away from completing development, really, in a way, which he does. Bishop e3. My rooks are now connected, and I can bring the A rook to the C file here. Just try to play this position as deep as I can. C6 might be a thing here after rook to C1, if he even plays that. There's a bishop D4 here. Yeah, this is definitely Magnus's grind type position. It's just boring, like that. I mean, but I have space, which is very important. Space is definitely some type of advantage. I can do things with space. I really wanted to have the bishop on the long diagonal. But, you know, it's not really feasible, especially if I can play f6 or even bishop e5 to trade more pieces off. So you want to keep a few pieces on. He plays rook d1, maybe a potential d6 later on if possible. b6 for bishop b7. Okay.
Yeah, I guess that black light square bishop needed to breathe. Right. It needed to get out somehow, and he's found a way to do that. There is a threat on the board. Black's dark square bishop wants to slide to c5, hitting the white queen, hitting the white bishop on e3 as well. So Magnus needs to move his queen, and he needs to move it now.
Yeah, and Magnus just deciding which is a good square to move to the queen to. Meanwhile, Hikaru developing his own light squared bishop. It could step up to b7. It could step up to a6. But it is going to be about the time scramble. It is going to be about trying to bring Magnus down to level the clock for Hikaru. But currently, Magnus keeps a huge time advantage on the clock. But he's gone into a bit of a think right now. What squares come to your mind? Queen g4, queen d2? Queen d2.
Yeah, he just retreats the queen. I think it's a good decision, but to me, this is a tale of two halves. Not first half, second half like we think in sports, but here it's about the halves of the board. We look at the left side of the board, the queen side. Black has 4 pawns to white's 3, but unfortunately for black, those pawns are not so mobile, and that is going to be a problem for Hikaru to deal with, because if that bishop safely moves away from e3 for white, watch out. That pawn will go up to e4 afterwards, maybe f4 to follow, and then the pawns are rolling. So I think that white's pawns are just better placed, and Hikaru will have his work cut out for him.
Yeah, he does. And, OK, he's playing on the side he's strongest. Makes a lot of sense. He pushes this pawn forward. He's saying, OK, these two will never advance at least. Maybe this bishop will try to make Robert's plan slightly less feasible by putting some pressure on this backward e-pawn. But Magnus is saying, OK, look at my rooks. They're so much more efficient than yours right now. This is the big target in the position. And watch out for Magnus as well. At the right moment, trying to trade off these bishops just to highlight the weakness of this backward pawn. Still early days, of course, but lots of maneuvers here, and maneuvering positions actually cost players more time on the clock. So in terms of the Armageddon, great strategy for Magnus. This one is not going to fizzle out anytime soon. We won't see queen trades anytime soon either. So how is Hikaru going to manage with 6 minutes, no increment?
And is that Magnus's strategy? Just keep the pieces on the board, just keep making moves. Even if they don't have direct threats, he just wants to bring Hikaru down on the clock, flag him.
You remember the advice we gave Artemiev? Be shameless. Magnus has no problem with that. He will flag Hikaru if the opportunity presents itself. And right now, he has nearly double the time. We think his position is better here. So I think James will agree with me over here. Magnus, he knows how to play a bullet game or two.
Absolutely, 100% knows how to play bullet. And with the best of them, I mean, even playing Hikaru all the time in these matches, too, as well. I mean, people always like, hey, these guys should play. Hikaru and Magnus should play mini games in bullet. People want this to happen, and bishop f4 on the board.
More trades offered, and that's exactly what we're talking about,
crazy.
that Magnus needs to keep more pieces on the board. Is this a surprising move?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and there's a trap involved in this move. If black gets greedy here, Hikaru's calculating it. He will have to burn some time here, but if you get greedy and grab a pawn, this backfires instantly. Your queen is hit immediately and skewered.
Yikes.
Queen takes queen. There's an intermediate check. Zwischenzug, Zwischenschuck, as they say in German, in between check and when the king moves, the queen drops. White has won a rook. So Hikaru spots that, of course. He moves his bishop. And now Magnus will be thinking, firstly, he can step his pawn forward, free of charge. You can start advancing on the side you're stronger. We talked about those two halves of the board. Secondly, there might be sacrifices on this square at the right moment. And yeah, I would be worried for Hikaru if white can get away with that safely. First of all, the pawns start advancing. The avalanche begins. And, OK, after a trade, look how backward this pawn is on c7. Eternal weakness for black.
That's ugly.
Wow, this looks like bad news. And Magnus there hinting or doubling up on the C line, targeting the weakness that, David, you just pointed out. Is this position more dangerous than it looks for Hikaru, Robert?
Hikaru wouldn't want this position a classical game against Magnus Carlsen. You give them both an hour, I still think that white wins this position a large percentage of the time, because the position for black, you're just shuffling back and forth. White can make progress. And speaking of progress, throw the H pawn up the board. There could be an attack because black is saddled with this weakness on c7. Every move that's being played is actually growing the advantage for Magnus.
Yeah, it's like the board is cut in half. You mentioned those two halves. White is totally in control on both flanks now. And black, his army will be stretched. Later on, they will be overwhelmed, most likely, because black's pieces will be tied down to that weak c7 pawn, the backward pawn we highlighted, and Magnus will switch his attention to the other flank too.
I knew it was coming.
Does
there
it
it is.
immediately.
Yep. G4. I was like, can I play G4 here? Anytime I can put a pawn on G4, we're going for it, right? So G4, rook G3, G5 is coming. You have the rook live. It can shift to both sides of the board. I mean, white is definitely in control in this game.
Yeah, beautiful decision. It's the tale of two fronts. If you attack on both sides, the opponent cannot, will not have a reply. And also 6 extra minutes. That has grown since the start of this game, the time advantage. Nakamura wincing, not enjoying his last move, but he needed to put pawns on dark squares. He has no dark square bishop. He needs some control. Ugly chess.
That's a girl's move.
When you put the pawns on dark squares, your light squares become weaker. If that bishop on g2, if you could pick it up and put it on the square f5, I think black would be toast. But unfortunately, that bishop is behind its own wall of pawns for the moment. At some point soon, we may see that bishop head to h3, push that pawn to g5, and I know James likes to say, we live, because that bishop may kill black's chances with the checkmate.
Absolutely. You're going to have to play something like bishop b7, but you can't even play that because it breaks the connection of the pawn on c7. He plays g5 anyway. Break it up. Open up shop, big fella.
Wow.
Open up.
He's really going for it, not holding back at all. H4, G4, G5, what momentum. And it looks like the rooks are ready to get into the attack as well. Every single piece perfectly placed for this.
Yeah, looking great for white. However, Hikaru hits Magnus with a threat. The white queen there needed to step back. That was an important tempo gainer. And now black has gone up a pawn temporarily, but watch out for this white bishop. It's coming, James.
What the? You can play that?
You can take on c7 now?
You can get away with that?
Wow, white's rook can just grab that backward pawn that we've been talking about. This looks fantastic.
Does it? He does it, David.
Yeah, and after this rook trade, we're going to be left with a position still level material, but black's king so open. White's rook is coming into the 7th rank. This looks like a massacre. It should end in a checkmating attack.
You know what move I like here? Because white could give a check, but the black king will escape back. I would put the move queen h7. Take away the escape score. That just feels like a speed chess move. Because now Hikaru has to figure out after the queen goes up to h7 with rook c7 check coming next. Where is your king going to? It's going to be a quick checkmate. So I think this is a very nasty move to face when you have a few minutes in your clock.
Really instructive. You find that move by looking at your opponent's replies, your opponent's plans and their hopes after rook check. As Robert says, actually the king is pretty safe temporarily on g8. So cut that one out. And Magnus is paused. He's not playing the most natural move in the position, this rook check. Therefore, he might find the even stronger queen h7, taking control of the escape square. That might be a killer. Nakamura with 4 minutes on his clock. He will struggle to find a defense to that move, queen h7.
It's a strong move.
Wow.
Hikaru is thinking about queen h7 as well. He definitely has it on his radar. He's trying to think what happens if Magnus finds this move. It is a big moment in this Armageddon game. If Magnus goes queen h7, big trouble for Hikaru on the clock, 4.5 minutes. Is he going to do it? Or will he give a check with the queen or the rook? I think he does it. He goes for it. Robert, you called it. He finds it, and Hikaru immediately hates the fact that Magnus found this move.
Yeah, because now what does black do? Because you want to block a check on the 7th rank, but you can't give it the 8th rank either. And most endgames will be winning for white. Let's talk about pawn structure for a second. Black's pawn structure is broken. So most endgames will result in a pretty easy advantage and maybe a win for white. So I'm not liking the look of this for Hikaru, especially now as he's about to dip under 4 minutes.
Yeah, you need an hour on your clock to defend this one. But look, Hikaru doesn't have that luxury. OK, he brings his rook across. Really nice defense. He's actually trying to slide his king back the other way. And the black rook and the black queen are actually lined up, so watch out for a counterattack against the white king later. Queen of rook positions when it's just major, heavy pieces on the board. It's all about the king safety. Black's king, not safe, but the white king might have some questions too.
This boy got some of the best defense I've ever seen. Rook f8 is nasty because after check, king e8, now I'm hitting f2. And a draw is all I need, big fella. So if you make a mistake and I take on f2, I at least have a draw there. You might even be losing in some cases. So, wow. I mean, what a defensive move there. After rook check, king to e8, and now h2 is hanging. I was also thinking if I could play e5 here. Pawn e5 is that it dislodges the queen, right? Let's show that on the board. Pawn e5 is nice. I mean, if queen takes, then you might be in some trouble here. Yeah, engine automatically goes up. And maybe like a queen something. h5. Queen c2, maybe.
Queen c2 is nasty, James.
Yeah, because you have to defend, and you got queen c6 and rook check. Yeah, absolutely. Right.
James, you're on fire.
I am a Jedi. Sometimes I forget that. Sometimes I forget. But it is, that's nice. But let's go back to pawn takes. After e5, what happens on pawn takes?
Ooh,
yeah, and this is the problem I had.
Same idea, maybe. Just rook c7 check, and
maybe
queen
rook
c2.
c6 first. Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right.
Same idea,
yeah.
but the point, the queen comes back to c2. So, James, you're mixing offense and defense, and that's nasty.
I appreciate that, Jedi.
Beautiful
I appreciate
stuff.
that. Yeah, Big Robert, I'm trying to get like you. Okay, so, yeah, that's nice. Let's see what happens.
One thing I want to point out, yesterday Hikaru blundered mate in 1 on the f8 square. Now he's learnt from that. Yesterday it was rook f8, now he finds a defense, rook f8. I was just looking, that was the only move pretty much to stay in this game for Hikaru Nakamura. So he's learned from yesterday, but will Magnus find a breakthrough now? The more I look at it, James, the more I like that move. I think Magnus needs to go for something like that before it's too late. Otherwise the advantage might fizzle out and disappear.
He's calculating right now, but Hikaru Nakamura in just 30 seconds finds the best move in the position for black, bringing that rook, not just defending his king, but also putting pressure on Magnus's king on g1. It's not an easy idea to find what James has mentioned, to retreat the queen all the way back to that c2 square once the e-pawn advances. Will Magnus be able to find this? He's gone into a think tank. He is looking for the blow in this position. Do you think he's going to go for this? Will he sacrifice the e-pawn?
I don't know. I didn't see it coming until James mentioned it. So while I'm trying to wrap my head around this, I want to give a quick shout out to Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. He takes down Anish Giri, makes it to the grand final in Division 2. So MVL, the Frenchman with 3 names, he's doing quite well. And shout out to over 60,000 of you watching this broadcast. We appreciate you too.
Wee, 60K.
Hey, everyone.
What's up, y'all? What's good? We here. What up, what up?
Wow. I think the world just loves to see Magnus and Hikaru battle it out, and this is why we love it. Both players bringing on the best attack and the best defense. I see the eval bar. It says that black is still fine. Well, you don't have e5 just yet because the f2 pawn is hanging.
counterattack. Black has a threat.
Problem.
That's why the move order was so important. James's kind of fleeting opportunity pushing that white pawn forward. It's not available anymore. Let's just show that. Queen takes pawn is a killer blow if Black gets time for it. Queen takes pawn. That's why Rook F8 was such a nice defense for Hikaru. Now, how does Magnus deal with this? You have to take a timeout. You don't really want to have to retreat the white queen to a passive square. What would she be doing here? I don't think she's doing much. And what else? You simply have to do something. Do you bring your rook back? But that feels wrong. He's checked and traded off the rooks. And we're in a queen endgame. This is the current position.
The worst is over.
No passed pawns for white.
Worst is over, man. This might be a draw.
Yeah, and it's equal pawns. And if it's a draw, that means Hikaru actually takes the match. He knocks out Magnus Carlsen to go into the grand final. Magnus there missing a big opportunity, but Hikaru is going to have to defend this till the very end.
It's going to be very difficult because of the pawn structure. Look at Black's pawns. They're loose no matter where your head turns to. And there's a pawn hanging. Black could take White's pawn on b2, but that won't be a good idea because White will deliver a check and win this d6 pawn. And in this kind of endgame, it's often about the quality of the pawns. And if White can win a pass pawn there, if we just show this line, queen b2, check, take on d6 with check, and the important point is the d5 pawn will run to the other side. We'll see a second queen appear. White will win this game. So Hikaru sees this, and now he's deep in the think tank. He really doesn't have that much time. Magnus actually can flag Hikaru here. 3 minutes is not that much compared to your opponent's 5.
This is tough. This actually is tough. I mean, queen end games are the hardest ones. And go through your, open up your Devereski page 687, right? When you get there, and it's going to tell you about the queen end games that are very hard, like this one. But yeah, queen e5 I thought was a move, but like it's definitely difficult. Very hard to defend this, actually.
Yeah, centralization with the queen makes sense. When in doubt, centralize your queen. The one thing I know about queen endgames is that nobody knows anything about queen endgames. They're that difficult. You just have to guess at some point. You have so many options. Black's queen had 5 or 6 viable squares. Why not choose the center? Just make that quick decision. And Magnus, I don't think there's anyone as good in queen endgames as Magnus in history. So if anyone can win it, it should be him. Objectively, though, it feels like Black should be safe enough because the white king isn't exactly protected either. We could definitely see a perpetual check later if the black queen is able to start harassing the enemy king. So Hikaru, if he's able, should be able to hold this, but 3 minutes. I really fear for him on the clock. Magnus needs to speed up, just bring that white queen back somewhere to safety and just keep the tension. Keep asking those questions. Black's king not finding any safe squares anytime soon.
The problem is the safe squares. I might actually find safety if I can by actually moving the king forward. As you saw with the Fabi game, Hikaru, when the king went all the way up to g4. Something similar like that. Because if I can get my king to maybe f4 and then take, so that's not going to be allowed now. So maybe just king g6.
Magnus spent a long time on that move, though, over a minute. And with only a few minutes left with Armageddon format, that it could be vital later. Now the black king advances. White's pawns now under fire on the queen side. Black's queen may be threatening to go and capture them in the next move or two. Yeah. Magnus needs to defend for a move.
Hikaru brings the king into the game, playing the role of a key defender for the king's side pawns. So playing with whatever is left makes a lot of sense. Meanwhile, White's king isn't that active. It looks like Magnus's hopes are purely on the clock right now.
And Hikaru's thinking, can I take this pawn on b2? Magnus brings his king up. I thought he was going to push the pawn that was under attack to save it. And Hikaru's looking at it. He wants to snack on it. And I feel like what the problem for Magnus right now is even if he starts throwing this game, his advantage out the window, he needs to start making moves more quickly. Hikaru would punish Magnus if the colors were reversed on the clock. Magnus needs to do the same.
Yeah, Magnus, he's a great speed player, of course, but his mouse skills, I don't know if they match Hikaru's. And, okay, still extra minute on the clock. He does fix the structure on the queen side, and the black king runs in that direction. Actually, if the queens disappear, Magnus has great winning chances right now. Can he force that in a favourable situation? Advancing, leading from the front, the white king.
I was not expecting that move.
Yeah, king f3 definitely is a nice move, because I'm like zugged out, meaning zugzwang. Like, what do I do as black? I just have to shuffle back and forth.
Queen f5 was a big turn, and g6, a huge blunder. What did Hikaru miss here? What is the winning move?
It might have been queen e6. It might have been queen e6.
What was the winning move?
Trade him in king g4.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow. Forcing the queens off was winning. James is right. Just a couple of moves ago. This was not obvious at all for a human.
I said a lot of Devereski there, pawn in games, right? Queen e6 takes, and then king g4, king f6, and I think he's zugged out, f3.
Let's quickly show that, James. Queen swap, and as you mentioned, it is Zugzwang. This position, black needs to defend his pawns, and here white can just wait. For example, black's king can even hit this one, and you have another waiting move. You just push this pawn.
And then take the pawn.
Yeah.
And GG, you win. Wow. Sick.
And second event in a row where Hikaru is fortunate because against Wesley So in the Air Things Masters, this was exactly what was happening in a queen endgame. A queen trade could have led to a win for Wesley, but I think this is not over for Hikaru. Magnus is going to keep the game going. Look at the clocks. Magnus is up nearly 40 seconds, and the defensive task, just because the king is run to the queen side, it's not over for Hikaru.
Yeah, this one, he's going to have to defend backs to the wall for the rest of this game, at least another 50 moves, and he's going to have to keep pace on the clock. Look at the two kings. They're running to safety. We said there's never going to be safety for them. They're hiding from any potential checks on that side.
David, the clock, it's getting level there. So it will come down to some dirty flagging by both of them. If the queens get traded, it is advantage Magnus simply because of Hikaru's horrible pawn structure for a king pawn ending. But till the queens are alive, Hikaru, it's game on. He just needs a draw.
Yeah, he just needs a draw, and wow, 10 seconds in it now. Magnus's camera also froze for a second. This is very relevant. Is his internet connection able to hold up? He's in France. Yeah.
Another big king move. I mean, these playing unexpected king moves, first to F3, now to B3, and Hikaru gives up D6.
He wants to take E4.
Is there a perpetual check?
Does he pick up the E4 pawn? Does he start checking?
Check.
Start checking that white king.
Check. He goes B3. There's no perpetual yet. He zigzagged to A3 and B3 after.
Wow, Hikaru now tanking for 20 seconds. He needs to move. I don't think you can get away with just grabbing that white pawn in the center. White would then be the one giving the checks, gaining time on the clock. You need to check and just hope for the best. You need to move.
But look at the clock. He's on a 1 minute, 15 seconds. This is not good. Unless he has a draw by force, he is going to be in trouble of being flagged.
You have to check.
It's a bullet game now.
You have to go king A3. Only move.
Correct.
Where is the draw?
B3.
B3.
No more checks.
But queen C3, does queen C6 check? I don't know what happens to the queen trade there.
What about centralize and then third mate, right? And then check everywhere else.
Yeah.
He has a check, but then I run A6.
He's got to work it out with less than a minute on his clock. Can he afford a queen trade? Can he threaten checkmate, trap that white king somehow on the edge of the board? He needs to find an accurate move. If he makes a slip now, Hikaru, he's losing.
Queen B1.
I think, though, there's always queen C6 back to C3. So he goes here. I think Magnus can either queen C6 check and bring his queen back to defense. As long as you don't allow a perpetual check, he can flag Hikaru.
Yeah, he can flag Hikaru. Just give a couple of checks first, a couple of quick checks, gain time on the clock, and then retreat that white queen.
Yes.
There's no increment, though. Well, he does give a check. If he comes back, there is a check on A1. Where do you retreat with your queen?
Back to C1, to the first rank. I know you're giving up a pawn F2. You maybe find yourself in a losing position at some point, but you need to beat him on the clock. He only has 45 seconds.
Yeah, 45 seconds. Just check, make your opponent react. That's how you kind of gain time, especially considering your opponent's lower. But Magnus, he's too slow. Again, not switching to that Armageddon mindset. You've got to be nasty. You've got to be mean here. Just flag.
That's right. He's definitely, when the time gets closer, Hikaru does get a little bit stronger here. Yep, there it is. He pushed and immediately made a move here.
Oh,
wow.
But that move, the eval bar went up. So white can maybe, look, queen E1. You have the A1 square covered. You protect your pawn. You may just start throwing that pass one off the board. He plays it.
That's gross.
And you've got the B4 square covered as well. No checks for black.
Just push the pawn. Just throw it.
Oh,
He does it. He finds it. And 30 seconds for Hikaru. Can he stop the E-pawn from advancing? Or is this just game over?
I think he's going to block it with his queen, but then he has no more checks.
Yeah, and then the black queen will be purely passive. It's going to be one-way traffic. The white queen is going to activate herself now. And you can play forever this position, Magnus, but 5-6 seconds in it. Wow, it's all about the clock now. It's a winning position for white, we think, or at least a better position, but is it enough on the clock?
Apparently he's made a mistake, but he is up a few seconds. This is going to come down to the wire, everybody.
Make a move, Hikaru. He does it. What?
I mean, he can't trade queens. The black king would be too close.
King E7.
Yeah.
I mean, D8. On the move, right?
19 seconds, he's going to flag him.
Any safe square for black.
Perpetual coming.
Oh, my God.
Oh, queen C2 check. So you have a counter check if black checks in the second rank. So he's checking in diagonals. Wow, king B1.
Got to move.
Oh, no more checks.
Oh, and what's happened there?
What happened?
We see a reaction. Magnus is mouse.
Oh, no!
Oh, my God. Did he pre-move?
He mouse slipped.
Oh, and Hikaru there celebrating. Magnus mouse slipped, blundering into that queen. What an end.